The homestead dream versus the harsh reality. Hello friends, and welcome back to Farmyard Care. If you're the kind of person who checks the pasture before breakfast, worries about every dry week in August, stretches every dollar on feed, and wants both your cattle and your land to stay productive year after year, then you are in exactly the right place. Have you ever stepped outside late in the season, looked across your field, and realized the green is gone, replaced by dry, brittle grass that won't carry your herd much longer? And when winter starts closing in, have you felt that quiet pressure in your chest, knowing more of your income may soon disappear into bale after bale of expensive hay? That is the hard reality for so many cattle owners, small homesteaders, family farmers, and land stewards trying to do things the right way. But here's the good news. The answer is not always more bought feed, more stress, or more reacting to the weather. Very often, the real answer is already under your feet. The long-term success of any cattle operation begins with understanding and managing the forage chain, choosing the right grasses at the right time so your animals have steady, high-quality nutrition across the seasons. This is not just about planting seed and hoping for the best. It is about building a smart, resilient pasture system that works with nature instead of against it. In this video, we're going to lay out a practical, science-backed pasture blueprint built around 5 powerful forage grasses that can help close the summer slump, bridge the winter gap, and make your farm far more self-reliant. So if you're ready to grow more feed, reduce waste, and take better control of your pasture year-round, stay with me. And before we move on, make sure you subscribe to Farmyard Care so you do not miss the next step in building a healthier, more productive farm. Part 1. The bovine bioreactor and the forage chain concept. Before we get into the 5 grasses that can completely change the way you feed your herd, we need to start with one important question. How can an animal weighing well over 1,000 pounds build muscle, maintain body condition, and in many cases produce rich, nourishing milk from something as simple as grass? The answer is one of the most fascinating things in livestock farming. A cow is not just grazing in a field. In many ways, she is a living biological engine designed to turn forage into energy with remarkable efficiency. Deep inside the rumen, billions of microbes go to work breaking down tough plant fibers that many other animals could never use. As they ferment that forage, they create volatile fatty acids, and those compounds provide the majority of the cow's usable energy. That is why good grazing is never just about quantity. It is about giving that rumen the kind of forage it can process well. And this is where many farms either struggle or begin to thrive. The performance of that whole system depends on the forage itself, its digestibility, its fiber structure, its stage of growth, and its nutrient value. A dry cow can get by on a very different feed base than a cow nursing a calf or producing heavily. When nutritional demand rises, protein and energy have to rise with it. That is exactly why the idea of a strong forage chain matters so much. If your farm depends on only one grass, then your entire feeding program rises and falls with that grass alone. When it slows down, your animals feel it, and your wallet feels it even faster. But when you combine cool season grasses with warm season grasses, you create a much smarter system. Instead of leaving feed gaps between seasons, you build a pasture plan that keeps something productive, useful, and nutritious growing for much more of the year. That is how you move away from crisis feeding and toward a more stable, self-reliant operation. And with that foundation in place, let's step into the first major player in this pasture system, the grass that earns its value when the cold sets in and everything else begins to fade. Part 2. Tall Fescue, the rugged winter warrior. When frost starts showing up on the ground and other pastures begin to weaken, tall fescue is often the grass still standing there with strength left in it. For many livestock producers, it is one of the most dependable, cool season perennials ever put into a pasture system, and it has earned that reputation through sheer toughness. Tall Fescue handles stress better than many grasses because it comes equipped with a deep, fibrous root system and an impressive ability to tolerate a wide range of soils and growing conditions. Where more delicate species thin out, slow down, or disappear altogether, fescue keeps pushing. That kind of resilience is a major reason it has become such a cornerstone in temperate grazing systems. But there is also an important detail every serious cattle producer should understand. For years, one of tall fescue's survival advantages came from a fungus living inside the plant. That relationship helped the grass tolerate drought pressure and resist insect damage. But older wild-type endophytes also brought a serious downside. They could produce toxins that cause what farmers know as fescue toxicosis, a condition that can raise body temperature, reduce performance, and hold back weight gain in cattle. Thankfully, forage science did not stand still. Today, producers have access to novel endophyte tall fescue varieties, and this has been a major step forward. These improved types keep the hardiness, persistence, and field performance that made fescue valuable in the first place, but without the harmful toxin issues that made the older stands risky for livestock. And this is where tall fescue becomes a true game changer on a working farm. Stockpiling. If you pull cattle off a fescue pasture in late summer or early fall and allow that field to grow undisturbed, you can save a standing bank of forage for later use. While many grasses lose quality fast and become dry or brittle, fescue can remain green, usable, and nutritionally valuable well into the cold season. In practical terms, that can stretch your grazing season by several months and dramatically reduce how soon you need to start feeding hay. For any farmer tired of watching winter feed bills climb, that matters in a very real way. Tall fescue is not flashy, but when the year turns cold and feed becomes expensive, it proves exactly why it deserves a permanent place in a well-designed pasture system. And now that we have our winter warrior in place, let's move to another grass that brings quality, palatability, and balance to the pasture at a different time of year. Part 3. Orchardgrass, the high-quality companion. Now, if tall fescue is the rugged winter warrior in this system, then the next grass earns its place as the refined and reliable partner that brings quality to the table in a different way. I'm talking about orchardgrass, a forage that has long been respected for how well cattle take to it and how beautifully it fits into a thoughtfully managed pasture. Among cool season grasses, orchardgrass is often praised for its excellent palatability, and for good reason. It gets established relatively quickly, comes on strong in the early part of the growing season, and produces forage that is both nutritious and highly digestible. But what really makes orchardgrass so useful is not just the feed value you see above ground. It is also the way the plant grows. Unlike grasses that spread into a dense, solid mat, orchardgrass grows in bunches, and that growth habit creates one of its biggest advantages. Because it leaves space between plants, it opens the door for something every smart pasture manager should be thinking about: legumes. White clover, red clover, and other companion legumes can settle into those open spaces and become part of a much more balanced forage system. And that matters because legumes do more than add diversity. They help capture nitrogen from the air and return it to the soil, reducing the need for purchased fertilizer and strengthening the pasture naturally over time. Orchardgrass also shines in places where some other grasses begin to struggle, especially around trees or in fields with partial shade. If you are building a silvopasture system where livestock, forage, and trees all work together, orchardgrass is often one of the best choices you can make. That combination can help keep cattle more comfortable during hot weather, while still maintaining productive, attractive grazing underneath the canopy. But this grass does ask for good management in return. Orchardgrass does not like being grazed too hard or too low. If you keep taking it down too far, you weaken the plant and reduce its ability to bounce back. In most cases, maintaining a residual height of around 3 to 4 inches helps protect its energy reserves, and keeps the stand productive. Give Orchardgrass that level of care, and it will reward your herd with a clean, balanced, high-quality forage that fits beautifully into a sustainable system. And once that quality foundation is in place, the next grass takes things a step further by bringing serious power and performance when rapid growth really matters. Part 4. Perennial Ryegrass, the high-energy powerhouse. If your goal is to put condition on cattle quickly, support strong gains, or drive high performance from a forage-based system, then this next grass deserves your full attention. Perennial ryegrass is the high-energy powerhouse of the pasture, and when it is growing under the right conditions, very few perennial grasses can match what it brings to the feed bunk without ever leaving the field. For producers focused on intensive finishing or high-producing dairy animals, perennial ryegrass has earned a reputation as one of the very best options available. Its energy density is exceptional, and in some situations, its feed quality can compete with very good alfalfa. That is a remarkable trait for a grazing grass, and it is one of the main reasons ryegrass has become such a valuable tool in well-managed forage systems. So what makes it perform that well? A big part of the answer is in its chemistry. Perennial ryegrass contains high levels of water-soluble carbohydrates, essentially plant sugars, along with relatively low lignin content. In practical terms, that means cattle can digest it quickly and efficiently. The forage moves through the rumen well, allowing animals to consume more, convert more, and make better use of every bite. On a forage-only diet, cattle grazing quality ryegrass often show some of the strongest daily gains you can expect from pasture. But like any high-performance tool, it demands the right conditions. Perennial ryegrass is not the toughest grass in the system when winter stress, poor fertility, or dry conditions start pushing hard. It needs fertile soil, dependable moisture, and moderate temperatures to really show what it can do. That is why I often compare it to a finely tuned machine. It delivers impressive results, but only when it is managed with care. And because plant breeders are always looking for better solutions, there are now fesculoliums, hybrids that blend the rich sugar profile and quality of ryegrass with more of the durability and stress tolerance found in fescue. That kind of innovation shows just how valuable ryegrass traits really are. When spring arrives and your pastures begin to wake up, perennial ryegrass can deliver the surge of energy that gets the entire grazing season moving fast. And of course, once that cool season flush begins to fade, we need another grass ready to take over when the heat becomes the real test. Part 5. Bermudagrass, the heat-tolerant engine of the South. But now we come to the moment that exposes the weakness in so many pasture systems. What happens when June rolls into July, the heat settles in, the rain becomes uncertain, and those beautiful, cool season grasses that carried you through spring begin to slow down or shut down almost completely? This is the summer slump, and for many farmers, it is the point where the pressure starts building fast. This is also where the right forage plan changes everything. While many producers start reaching for stored feed or expensive supplements, you already have your next move in place. That move is Bermudagrass, the heat-tolerant engine of the South and one of the most dependable warm-season perennials a cattle farm can have. When orchardgrass and ryegrass begin to rest, Bermudagrass is just getting started. It loves heat, handles humidity well, and spreads aggressively through rhizomes and stolons, forming a dense, durable sod that stands up to grazing pressure. And with the development of improved hybrids like Tifton 85, Bermudagrass has become even more valuable, offering larger leaves, better digestibility, and the kind of productivity that can carry a herd through the toughest stretch of summer. Under solid management, and especially when fertility is kept where it should be, Bermudagrass can produce an enormous amount of forage. In fact, it can generate well over 10,000 pounds of dry matter per acre, giving your farm serious carrying power right at the time when many other pastures are struggling to produce enough to matter. That kind of growth can be the difference between staying ahead and constantly trying to catch up. And yes, when the first frost arrives, Bermudagrass will go brown and slip fully into dormancy. But that is not a failure in the system. That is exactly how the system is supposed to work. Because just as Bermudagrass begins to rest, your cool season grasses are preparing to rise again. It is one season handing the job to the next. And when it is planned correctly, it becomes one of the most efficient feeding rhythms nature can offer. But if we want a pasture truly built for hard times, we still need one more layer of protection. Part 6. Switchgrass, the deep-rooted native insurance. So far, we have covered 4 major grasses that can dramatically strengthen a grazing system. But if the goal is to build a farm where cattle stay fed, even when weather patterns turn extreme and drought becomes more unpredictable, then we need more than productivity alone. We need resilience. We need a backup plan built into the land itself. And that is where switchgrass enters the picture. Switchgrass is the wild card in this system, and in many ways it may be the most reassuring grass of them all. Unlike several of the others, which were introduced and often depend on stronger management inputs, switchgrass is a native, warm-season tallgrass with an extraordinary ability to survive where other forages begin to fail. Its greatest strength lies below the surface. This plant can develop roots that reach down as deep as 10 feet, tapping into moisture reserves far beyond the reach of shallower-rooted species. That matters enormously in a drought. When Bermudagrass begins to slow and Tall Fescue loses color under severe dry conditions, switchgrass keeps reaching downward, finding what other plants cannot. It is built for endurance, not panic. And because of that, it can continue producing useful forage in conditions that would leave many other grasses struggling or completely stalled. Switchgrass is also a practical choice for the parts of the farm that are less fertile, less pampered, or simply harder to manage intensively. It can perform well on marginal ground where something like ryegrass would never meet expectations. That makes it especially useful for rougher acreage, distant paddocks, or fields that are not your best land but still need to contribute to the operation. And there is something else I appreciate deeply about switchgrass. It does more than feed cattle. It supports the broader health of the farm by creating habitat for beneficial insects and ground-nesting birds, adding ecological value right alongside forage value. Once it is established well, it asks for very little and stays productive for years. In that sense, switchgrass is not just another pasture option. It is peace of mind rooted deep in the soil, a long-term insurance policy for the farm when the weather refuses to cooperate. Part 7. The magic of synergy, legumes and soil health. Now, by this point, you can probably see how powerful these 5 grasses are on their own. But if you really want to get the best out of every acre, then we have to go below the surface. Because the real engine behind lasting pasture productivity is not just the forage you plant, it is the soil that supports it. No matter how good your grass varieties are, their performance will always be tied to soil chemistry and overall soil health. If your soil pH falls too low, especially below that 5.5 mark, problems begin stacking up fast. Aluminum can become toxic, root growth gets restricted, and phosphorus, which is essential for strong root development and plant energy, becomes far less available. That is why one of the smartest habits any serious farmer can build is regular soil testing. When the numbers call for it, agricultural lime is not an optional extra. It is part of building a pasture that can actually perform the way it should. And then we come to the input cost that so many grass farmers know all too well: nitrogen. Year after year, it is one of the biggest expenses in keeping pastures productive. But this is where a thoughtful system starts paying you back. Remember the space we talked about in orchardgrass stands? That space becomes incredibly valuable when you use it to establish legumes like clovers and alfalfa. Once they are in place, they work in partnership with rhizobium bacteria, and those tiny organisms do something remarkable. They pull nitrogen from the atmosphere and help make it available in the soil, feeding the pasture naturally. That means a well-balanced field with a strong legume presence can significantly reduce your need for purchased nitrogen. In fact, when legumes make up around 30% of the stand, they can contribute enough nitrogen to support very respectable grass production without leaning so heavily on synthetic fertilizer. That is not just good agronomy, that is smart farm economics. But while we are talking about building a healthier pasture, we also need to protect the herd that depends on it. Lush spring ryegrass growth, especially under rapid conditions, can sometimes trigger a magnesium imbalance known as grass tetany, and that is not something to take lightly. A quality, high magnesium mineral during the spring transition is one of those small management steps that can make a big difference in keeping cattle healthy, steady, and safe. Because on a well-run farm, the goal is never just to keep animals fed. It is to keep them truly thriving. And once the soil, the legumes, and the grasses are working together, the final step is putting the whole system into motion across the year. Part 8. Building your year-round pasture matrix. The strategy. So now the big question is this: how do you turn all of these grasses into one practical working system? The answer is where the real brilliance of this approach comes in. You do not throw all 5 grasses into one field and hope nature sorts it out. You build a seasonal pasture matrix, a managed rotation where each species steps forward when conditions suit it best, and then hands the job off as the year changes. In spring, you begin with your high-quality flush. This is the season when perennial ryegrass and orchardgrass really shine, delivering the digestibility, protein, and energy cattle need as they come off winter and move into stronger production. For lactating cows, growing calves, or animals needing to regain condition, this early growth becomes incredibly valuable. Then summer arrives, and with it comes the real test. As temperatures rise and the cool season grasses slow down, you shift the herd onto Bermudagrass and Switchgrass. This transition is what keeps the forage chain unbroken. Instead of forcing tired spring pastures to keep producing under heat stress, you let them rest, recover, and rebuild root reserves while your warm season grasses take over the heavy lifting. When fall begins to cool the landscape again, Tall Fescue and Orchardgrass surge back with fresh growth. This is your recovery phase, and it is one of the most useful windows in the whole system. It is a great time to add condition to calves, capture strong regrowth, and at the same time begin setting aside selected fescue paddocks for stockpiling. Then winter comes, and this is where your planning really proves its worth. Instead of relying immediately on machinery, stored hay, and daily feed hauling, you can use strip grazing on stockpiled tall fescue, giving the herd controlled access to fresh standing forage over time. That one management decision can stretch grazing deep into the cold season and dramatically cut feed costs. And the numbers behind this are exactly why so many producers are rethinking the way they manage pasture. Grazed forage often costs only a fraction of what it takes to harvest, store, and feed hay, sometimes as little as 25 to 35% of that cost. If you can extend your grazing season by around 90 days, the annual savings per cow can be substantial. Across a 100-head herd, that can translate into an additional $15,000 to $25,000 staying on your farm instead of leaving it. That is not a small improvement. That is a system powerful enough to change the financial future of an operation. The path to forage self-sufficiency. At the end of the day, good farming has never been only about working harder. It is about learning how to work with the land in a way that is wiser, more efficient, and more resilient over time. And that is exactly what this 5-grass system makes possible. When you bring together tall fescue, orchardgrass, perennial ryegrass, Bermudagrass, and switchgrass in the right way, you are not just planting forage. You are building a living system that supports your cattle, your soil, and your bottom line. This kind of pasture strategy moves you away from the exhausting cycle of reacting to every shortage with purchased feed and emergency decisions. Instead, it gives you something far more valuable: biological strength built right into the farm. When drought hits, switchgrass gives you a layer of protection. When winter closes in, tall fescue keeps working. When spring explodes with growth, ryegrass and orchardgrass carry the herd forward. And when the heat of summer would normally leave you scrambling, Bermudagrass steps in and keeps the system moving. That is how you protect more than just your cattle. You protect your time, your energy, your profits, and the long-term future of the land you care for. You reduce burnout, you make the farm more self-sufficient, and you create something that can keep producing for years, even when the weather does not cooperate. So now I want to hear from you. Which of these 5 forage grasses would you plant first on your farm? Tell me down in the comments below. And if this video helped you see your pastures in a whole new way, be sure to like this video, share it with another farmer, and subscribe to Farmyard Care for more practical ideas that bring together smart grazing, healthy soil, and sustainable farm life. Until next time, keep your soil alive, keep your pastures growing, and remember, plant these 5 forage grasses today, and your cattle will never go hungry again.